All right, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from RicoScores, and we're going to talk about whether this is good news or bad news. But apparently, Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn, who's getting whooped right now for everybody to watch by this Packers offense, Matt LaFleur, somebody from that 2013 crazy class and collection of underperforming coaching staff, and that, boy, that's just crazy. But apparently, Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn is a top head coaching candidate for the Washington Commanders, according to Rapoport, with sources close to Josh Harrison's situation. So we got to talk about Dan, the defensive coordinator, versus Quinn, the head coach. Which do we prefer and why? We're going to dive into stats. We're going to also, I got to always bring up, anytime we're talking about a defensive-minded head coach, I always got to bring up this very sneaky but dangerous issue that comes along with that. Even if you were to go and get like a Mike McDonald or a Mike Vrabel, there's a very sneaky issue that comes with hiring a defensive-minded head coach. We got to dive into that. But before we do, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. I've been busy all day today so far, so that's why I'm coming out with my first video today I'm recording this at 6:42 p.m. behind schedule, but doing some stuff with the family. And I was also on the Burgundy Zones podcast with my boy, the Podfather, and all of those guys over there. Make sure you go check them out and look at that, because we discussed a lot of great topics, including this one here today. So make sure y'all stay tuned for all the content. Again, your one-stop shop for everything Burgundy and Gold. I'm working on film sessions for a lot of draft prospects. I'm working on so many videos with just everything. I have so many topics, ideas. I'm working on a mock draft right now as well, and Adam Peters mock draft since we've hired him, all of that type of stuff. And so, man, make sure y'all stay tuned. But let's go and get to this video. Let's get it. All right, again, so the actual report reads Dan Quinn is among the top candidates for the Seattle Seahawks and the Washington Commanders head coaching openings. So it's not even like it's one of those things where it's like, man, Dan Quinn, Commanders, they're like a match made in heaven type of thing. No, Rapoport was just kind of going through and saying, well, as far as Dan Quinn goes, I'm hearing from close sources that the Seahawks and the Commanders both like him. So if that's true, if it's between us two, that's a really interesting situation, because Washington has already spoken with Anthony Weaver last week because the Ravens are on a bye week for this week's wild card round of the playoffs. We interviewed Mike McDonald reportedly as well virtually. The Commanders can speak to the rest of the candidates after the wild card round this week, as of like Tuesday and Wednesday, depending on when people played and stuff like that. But one of the coaches Washington has already requested permission to interview is Dallas defensive coordinator Dan Quinn. And so to back that up, Rapoport saying that he's one of our strongest candidates, that probably more likely to end up being our head coach. It makes sense because we have already requested to interview this guy. But now, do we want him? Because we got to compare Dan Quinn, the defensive coordinator, and Dan Quinn, the head coach. Those are two completely different things. And to go ahead and start this before we even dive into all of that, Seahawks, y'all can have him. If it's between us two for who can get him as a head coach, please take him away before Josh Harrison and Adam Peters even get any bright ideas, man. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Because first of all, I love Dan Quinn as a defensive coordinator. Do not get me wrong. As a defensive coordinator, he's one of the top guys in the NFL, point blank, period. If you're willing to come here as a defensive coordinator, please. But I want to stay very far away from him as a head coach. Trust me. As a full-time Falcons hater, like fully employed 40 hours a week, employee of the month, round the clock, active Atlanta Falcons hater, I loved what he did to them sorry little Falcons, man. Setting them back a few years. I'm telling you, man, you do not want this guy as your head coach. I mean, hey, Falcons, I'm hearing that, hey, just turn off this Packers-Cowboys game and think about potentially hiring him again, because I would love that. But as far as the Commanders as a head coach, please no, man. Please, man. What he did to help create and coach that Legion of Boom for the Seahawks, they carried that offense to a Super Bowl victory before Russell Wilson was even that good yet. Like, a lot of people don't really remember, but back then, Russell Wilson was still young. He wasn't the Russell Wilson that we learned to love that was like an elite quarterback in the NFL yet when he won the Super Bowl. They were truly led by that defense most notably, but also that running game, but the defense more than anything else. And Dan Quinn was the orchestrator, the guy running that whole show right there. So, defensive coordinator, great. And then he's also, what he's done for the Dallas Cowboys defense, fully tapping into the potential of like a Micah Parsons. Instead of making him an inside linebacker, which most people projected him to be, which he would still be great at. Micah Parsons, you put him on the field, ask him to do anything, he's going to be great at it. But he decided to deploy him as an edge rusher and a pass rusher more than anything else. And then now he's like an all-pro at it. So it's like his ceiling is even higher there. And Dan Quinn was the smart idea, the genius that probably, I think, deserves the most credit for that. And so you can argue also on top of that, the Cowboys defense isn't the most talented, especially after with Trevon Diggs getting hurt for pretty much the entire season and things like that, how they've had other guys step up. Again, just ignore this Packers-Cowboys game. Seahawks turn that game off. Don't even acknowledge that game. That's a fluke. That's just a one-time thing. Don't worry about it. Go ahead and hire him as a head coach. But man, they're up until the point of this Packers game, and right now I'm somewhere in the middle of the third quarter as I'm recording this right now. They are hooping. Well, they were hooping this season, especially in the regular season. Again, not looking great against the Packers right now, but up until today, their defense was balling. And again, without having even top-tier talent all over the place like the 49ers or the Ravens. So imagine Adam Peters' player evaluation, scouting and player development and bringing the right guys in, especially late round-wise, mixed with Dan Quinn's ability to maximize the talent that you have on a defense. That could be a match made in heaven as a defensive coordinator. I mean, look at the Dallas Cowboy ranks this season. And again, they don't have the talent that the 49ers or Ravens have, but still they're fifth in opponents' points per game, 18.5. Again, ignore this Packers game because they already done blown that out the water. They were already way past that before we even got to the second quarter, I think. And then opponents' yards per game, 299.7 allowed per game, which is also fifth. They're like fifth in two of the most important defensive statistics out there. And I wouldn't even argue they're a top 5 defense talent-wise. They're just top 5 production-wise, and that's coaching. Dan Quinn is an excellent defensive coordinator. But at the same time, 43-42 with a .506 regular season record as the Falcons head coach, 3-2 as a playoff record, unacceptable. Not terrible, but also not great. And like I always say, man, I'm going to keep saying this over and over again. The worst thing you can be as a professional sports franchise is perpetually average. Just an infinite loop of average is the worst place you can be. That's the type of stuff I only wish on my worst enemy, aka the Falcons. Because being in an infinite loop of never good enough to win anything meaningful, but also never bad enough to have a high enough draft picks to drastically increase your chances of getting game changers in the draft, future Hall of Famers and things like that, is just the worst place to be. You are far more likely to go from average forever to bad than average forever to good. Far more likely. Look at us. Look at this season, how we've ended up after being average for so long the past few years. You just keep putting band-aids on everything, and eventually you will sink. Dan Quinn as a head coach is literally the embodiment of my worst fear as a football fan. College football, there's no draft, so that's really the only time being perpetually average isn't the worst case scenario. But in the NFL level, NBA, all of those, where there's a draft included, being perpetually average is the worst place you could be. Because also, as long as you're just good enough and you feel like you're just a couple of steps away and all of that type of stuff, the coaching staff will also never be fired. Jack Del Rio and Ron Rivera stuck around as long as they did because we just kept being that close. And the first year Rivera was here, we won the division 7-9. I don't take any credit for that. I show no pride in that at all. If anything, I feel like that set us back even worse to prove my point. I mean, look at how many players we've been so close at getting that we barely missed in the draft by just 1 to 4 picks away in multiple rounds. Not just the first round, but multiple rounds. We're just 1 to 4 picks away from getting a way better player. Or at the very least, just a few picks away from being in range to where a team that we want to trade up with is willing to trade back to that spot so we can get the elite player that we really want. We've seen several examples of that from the behind the scenes videos of Martin Mayhew and Ron Rivera and all of those guys talking about, man, we had some guys we really wanted to trade up and get, but nobody was willing to trade back as far as we were in the second round and things like that to get a potential elite offensive lineman. Things like that with Brian Branch, we were like a couple of picks away from taking him. We could have just taken him in the first round like we told him we would, but we didn't. And then we held on to see if we could potentially get him in the second round, and we were like literally just 2 picks away from that. That's literally like just one more loss, and we probably are in range. We probably would have had a high enough draft pick to get all of the guys that we probably wanted. And that is a domino effect of now we have a bunch of band-aids, a bunch of high floor guys but not a high ceiling guys, to now we don't have any playmakers. When we need that one catch to win the game, it just feels like we don't really have that guy outside of Terry McLaurin. When we need that one strip sack to win the game or that one interception to win the game, it just doesn't feel like we have that guy as well. As much as I love a lot of our players on our team, they're really good, but are any of them just game changers? A guy that could just take over a game and win it for you? I mean, look at what Devon Witherspoon did to us when we played the Seahawks. We had all of the momentum in that game, and this happened before we ended up losing the game. It was like somewhere in the middle, but like Sam Howell, that strip sack on Sam Howell, that wasn't like the defensive coordinator calling that play. That's just Devon Witherspoon being a great player, a game changer, and going out there off schedule and just making a game changing play. Because we were moving that drive too. I think Sam Howell actually, like, on that exact play picked up like a first down with his run, and it's not like the defensive coordinator on the sideline said, okay, this play, after Sam Howell runs the ball, you go strip the ball from him. No, that's just a playmaker making a play. I don't feel like we have enough of those. So if he's willing to take a lateral move, to make a lateral move to come here, then great. Because honestly, one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL, in my opinion. Kind of excluding, again, what's going on in this playoff game against the Packers, but would he be willing to even make a lateral move? If the Seahawks want him as a head coach, they can have him. Please take him head coaching wise. But defensive coordinator, maybe he would be willing to take a lateral move. You never know. Highly doubt it. Highly doubt it. Let's start with that. I highly doubt he'd be willing to take a lateral move, being defensive coordinator for the Cowboys, and then being defensive coordinator for us. Highly doubt it. But the chance to abandon the ship from a disaster that is the Cowboys, it doesn't matter how great they look in the regular season, they always get to the playoffs and fold. Just completely fold and wilt to all of that. Just melts away. So the chance to jump off of that ship, and abandon that, to hop aboard this new wave of greatness being led by Adam Peters and Josh Harris, with the great Bob Myers, the elite Rick Spielman, and potentially a Bobby Slowick or Ben Johnson as head coach. And all you got to do is worry about the defensive side of things, and you're going to more than likely be a part of a potential Super Bowl contender. The future is bright over here. I don't know about the Cowboys. The future is bright over here, but the question is the future bright enough for him to make that lateral move? Again, I highly doubt it, but you never know. That may entice him a little bit. So if he is willing to take and make that lateral move, please come on down as a defensive coordinator. I mean, please, almost blank check worthy as a defensive coordinator. But boy, as a head coach, man, please, man. But say we did hire Dan Quinn as a head coach, we better hit on offensive coordinator. Like, you have to. You have to. Nobody looks at Dan Quinn as a QB developer or a QB whisperer. So with that number 2 overall pick, it's highly irresponsible to not bring in a great offensive mind that has a background in developing young quarterbacks to succeed immediately, like a Bobby Slowick. But the problem is Ben Johnson and Bobby Slowick definitely aren't making lateral moves. They're either going to stay where they are as offensive coordinators or leave to gain more power, more money, all of that type of stuff as a head coach elsewhere. They're not leaving there to be an offensive coordinator anywhere else. So if you do hire Dan Quinn as a head coach, which I hope doesn't happen, but if you do, the only way to make it make sense is to get a guy like Shane Waldron from the Seattle Seahawks, their offensive coordinator. That's the only way it could potentially even make sense in my eyes, because he's a great offensive coordinator if you do want to go defensive-minded head coach. But at the same time, if I'm going defensive-minded head coach, I prefer a Mike McDonald from the Ravens anyway. But just say if you hire Dan Quinn as your head coach, please go get a Shane Waldron. Please. The Seattle Seahawks already made it be known that whoever they bring in as a head coach is going to have full autonomy over the coaching staff, everything. So they've already basically told the entire coaching staff, including Shane Waldron, go ahead and start looking elsewhere for jobs. So it's not even like he's leaving for a promotion. He's leaving because he more than likely has nowhere to land. So he kind of has to go somewhere else. So if we do hire a defensive-minded head coach, that's a home run hire potentially in an offensive coordinator. But again, back to the point that I keep bringing up about these defensive-minded head coaches, man, I'm trying to tell you, it's hard because it's already difficult enough to hit on an offensive coordinator even just once, just to find the right guy once. But with how teams strongly covet offensive minds as head coaches, as we clearly do, and Bobby Slowick and Ben Johnson, like most teams in the NFL do, is going to, you have to get ready to find another great offensive coordinator, great offensive mind. Look at the Texans. Bobby Slowick was only there for 1 year as an offensive coordinator, 1 season. He hasn't even finished it. He's still currently going on in his first year as the Texans offensive coordinator, his first time being an offensive coordinator ever in his NFL career. And people, including us, are doing everything that we can to try to take him away from the Texans. So now the Texans are going to have to hope to hit on an offensive coordinator again. Poor DeMeco Ryans to take that risk to hire Bobby Slowick, a first-time offensive coordinator, as his offensive coordinator, and to succeed that well. And now you got to worry about doing it again within just 1 year and finding another offensive coordinator that can bring out greatness in CJ Stroud. That's just a problem I'm not sure you really want to deal with. Defensive-minded head coaches can work. They can. But boy, you better hit on offensive coordinator really well. And not only do you need to hit on it once, like I said, you need to be prepared to hit on it multiple times. Because if the offensive coordinator ends up being as great as we hope, other teams are going to want to steal him away and give him a promotion, more power, and a better title as a head coach rather than just staying for the Washington Commanders and being an offensive coordinator. But you never know, because Ben Johnson turned down that terrible situation with the Panthers last year to stay the offensive coordinator for the Lions. And then you have Darrell Bevell over there for the Miami Dolphins. He's not even an offensive coordinator. He's just a passing game coordinator, I believe. And he's willing to stay. Maybe we could get lucky with that type of situation, but I doubt it. So you hire a defensive-minded head coach, whether it's Dan Quinn or not, Mike McDonald, anybody, Mike Vrabel. Be ready to have to hit on the offensive coordinator multiple times, back to back, over and over again. I'm not sure Josh Harris and Adam Peters are ready to deal with that, and I'm pretty sure they're aware of that, because for the same reasons that we want an offensive-minded head coach is the same reason other teams want them as well, and they're going to keep getting poached away from your teams. But also, man, look at these memes. People are watching this Packers-Cowboys game. People are already putting up memes about us potentially withdrawing our interview request for Dan Quinn and waiting until later, or just completely taking it away. And it's not just us. I mean, it's probably multiple teams out there that have requested Dan Quinn to potentially be their head coach, requesting an interview for all of that type of stuff, looking at this game like, nah, I'm good. Yep, and Green Bay just scored again. So what is it about to be, 41-16 with 1 minute and 30 seconds left? Yeah, it's not looking good for you, Dan Quinn. It's not looking good. The memes may be a real thing. There may be at least one team out there that's watching this like, yeah, nah, I'm good. Matter of fact, delete that request. Matter of fact, delete your search history. Matter of fact, just block him just in case so he can't even call us back situation. But it's really interesting, too, because another coach from that famous 2013 Redskins staff that includes Mike McDaniels and even Bobby Slowick, who we're hoping we could bring in as a head coach, and Kyle Shanahan, Raheem Morris, who's the defensive coordinator for the Rams. That was a star-studded cast. It's ridiculous that we underperformed the way that we did. But Matt LaFleur is one of those coaches, and look at what he's doing for the Packers right now as their head coach against a potential head coach in Dan Quinn that we've requested his services. And so we'll see, maybe Matt LaFleur from that 2013 staff reverses the curse and helps us avoid getting Dan Quinn as a head coach with how many points he's putting up on Dan Quinn right now, exposing them and taking them off of our list. Shouts out to Matt LaFleur. That 2013 coaching staff was a big curse for us. But if we end up hiring Bobby Slowick from that 2013 staff and Matt LaFleur is one of the reasons, and he's from that 2013 staff as well, I'll take it. I feel like we have officially ended even there. We've neutraled out on that. I'll take it, man. The curse is finally uplifted. But again, up to this point of me recording this video, them boys already have 41 points. They're probably may even reach 50 by the end of this game, depending on the way this is going. So we'll see. But yeah, man, I'm willing to bet big money. Just bet, not even with this performance included, but especially after this performance that Dan Quinn is putting on right now in this playoffs game as a defensive coordinator, I'm willing to bet big money that we are more unlikely to hire one of the 3 head coaching candidates in this upcoming game after this Packers-Lions game, this upcoming Lions versus Rams matchup, than we are Dan Quinn. Between defensive-minded Raheem Morris, defensive coordinator for the Rams, Anthony Glenn, defensive coordinator for the Lions, or our boy Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator for the Lions. I feel like we're more likely to hire somebody from that game than anybody from this game, most notably Dan Quinn, just to put that out there. So rest easy. I know Ian Rapoport said that he's one of our top candidates, but I truly believe a lot of those reports that we're going to go all in on Ben Johnson. Adam Peters prefers Ben Johnson. And so far, everything we've done this offseason shows that when we really want somebody, we get that guy. I mean, months ago, if somebody would have told you that Adam Peters, Ian Cunningham, and Alec Hallaby, the top 3 GM candidates, were out there fighting each other for a chance to be the GM for the Commanders, people would have looked at you stupid. I've been telling y'all for weeks and a couple of months now that we have every reason to be very optimistic, and I already explained why we're a top GM and potentially head coach and landing spot, but a lot of people looked at me crazy and doubted it, and then look what happened with Adam Peters. I wouldn't be surprised if we have a very similar situation with head coach, because if anything, hiring Adam Peters here as your GM only increases your chances of getting one of the top head coach candidates like a Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick, Mike McDonald, any of those guys. So I'm thinking we may end up in a similar situation like we did with GM for the head coaching situation, where Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick, and Mike McDonald want to be our head coach by the end of the seasons, whenever they win or lose their playoff games or whatever. And then at the end of it, we have our pick between those 3. Rather than us competing against other teams to get them, they'll be competing against each other to come coach for us. I would not be surprised. A lot of people looked at me crazy when I said stuff like this weeks ago. Now look at the situation we were in with the GM. I'm pretty sure it can happen again with the head coach situation, the whole search and all of that. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the content. Like I said, this is your Burgundy and Gold one-stop shop. So whether it's a real fact, if it's or just even like a little flimsy little rumor, we're going to acknowledge that the fact that it is potentially a rumor, it may not be true, it may not be from a trustworthy source, but me being Rico of Street Scores, we still got to dive into it and talk about whether this is a rumor or a real fact from a real source. We're going to dive into whether we want this to happen or do we not want this to happen, why and why not. We're going to do that for everything. So it doesn't matter how small, how big, any news pertaining to the Burgundy and Gold, I got y'all. And again, I'm even working on a mock draft, and Adam Peters flavored mock draft. So make sure you stay tuned for all of that. And I appreciate all the support, man. Go become a channel member if you haven't already, because I'm working on exclusive film sessions for channel members only. No ads, nothing. You don't have to do anything. You're already a channel member. You're already paying to support the channel. Why would I put ads in the video? So I'm not doing anything to make money for those videos. That's free just for channel members. So stay tuned for all of that. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.